Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for today's webinar, Meredith Reeve, Mark Campbell, and Christina Oltoft. Meredith is Head of Next Generation Assessment for General Qualifications at Pearson. She began her career in education over 15 years ago as a senior secondary teacher and chief examiner in her native country of Australia. Meredith has a wealth of experience across academic, vocational and skills-based qualifications in the UK and internationally, and she's passionate about exploring future models of assessment that elevate the learner experience and best equip young people for the next steps in their lives. Mark is Head of Online Assessment Transformation at Pearson. He joined us in 2007 as an IT project manager, and after completing a major system rewrite and international English project, he was appointed to run the IT development and delivery for the National Curriculum Test, SATs, in England from 2009 through to 2019, at which point he then moved into assessment, managing Pearson's online assessment, delivery and marking platforms, bringing with him a huge wealth of experience. And finally, Christina is Head of Assessment Services for Pearson School Qualifications. She joined Pearson in 2012 as a partnership manager, working closely with school leadership teams. She then moved into the curriculum management team, leading on science, and helped drive and change and improvements into the heart of our science qualifications. In 2020, she launched our mock service and is now responsible for many of the integrated services and solutions that support our high stakes exam delivery. So an assembled team of crack experts in assessment. So welcome to all of you, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Susie, for the lovely introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. Thanks so much for joining us. I know that Mark, Christina and myself are really excited to be here today to talk to you about on-screen assessment, and it's great to have representatives from such a broad range of nations across the world. So thanks for joining us. In terms of the structure for today's Big Think webinar, I will be introducing a little bit about our vision for on-screen assessment at Pearson, and talking to you a little bit about the customer research that has led us to that point. I'm then going to provide a bit of an international perspective, so thinking about countries around the world that have made a transition to on-screen assessment and what we can learn from that, whether it be kind of a small-scale change or a kind of a more transformational approach. Mark is then going to talk to us a little bit about our capability and experience in on-screen assessment, which is really broad and varied at Pearson, and to introduce you to some of the progress we've made in international GCSE qualifications, which I know for many of you will be of great interest. And then Christina is going to talk to us about the fantastic on-screen mocks service and the real benefits that that's bringing to learners and teachers across the world. So in terms of our vision for on-screen assessment, our mission is to accelerate the education world's transition to on-screen learning, teaching and assessment that's authentic to learners' home and work lives. And our vision is to create an on-screen learning program that culminates in low and high stakes assessment, that accurately and fairly assesses student learning and enables students to access and achieve their full potential. And we think there are kind of four main areas of impact that on-screen assessment can really offer. The first is about authenticity. We think that on-screen assessment can provide an authentic experience for learners that chimes and works better with how today's young learners live, learn and think, and that can really bring subjects to life and prepare them for the world of work ahead of them. We think there are opportunities for on-screen assessment to provide faster and more efficient delivery of assessment and insights, and in the future potentially results as well to support progression. We think that there are opportunities for reduced teacher workload and admin burden, which I'm sure would be welcome for many of you, really enabling teachers to focus their time on maximising student potential, and game-changing actionable insights and data, really allowing teachers to improve the effectiveness and impact of their delivery and assessment, and for students to have more agency in their own learning journey. So in terms of our research and what schools have told us, we came to this vision and mission through really listening to school leaders and teachers about their experiences using technology in the classroom and their perceptions of perceived benefits and challenges of on-screen assessment in the future. So we know that the COVID pandemic and school closures have accelerated the use of technology in teaching and learning and formative assessment within schools, both in the UK and all over the world. So our market research suggests there is strong appetite for a move to on-screen assessment. In mid-2021, we surveyed teachers in around 1,000 UK and more than 120 international schools. And what it really demonstrated for us is that there is significant interest in high stakes, so summative on-screen assessment at GCSE and international GCSE level. So in terms of the survey response, 51% of respondents said they'd be interested in adopting on-screen assessment now if it was available in their subject area, and 65% said they'd be interested in adopting on-screen assessment within 1 to 4 years, which is staggering really if you think about talking about immediate change. The key drivers from a teacher's and the school leader's perspective were more accessible assessments for learners with SEND, assessments that better reflect learners' use of technology within and outside the classroom, and the potential for improved security of assessment. Key barriers or the kind of challenges that school leaders saw were around access to technology or equity of access between schools and within schools, reliability and trust, I suppose, in the testing platform and familiarity with that testing platform, and consistency and comparability between on-screen and paper-based assessments when we're in a period where we might be offering both modes at the same time. So we really wanted to dig more into this data. So in late 2021, we carried out a number of focus groups and interviews with school leaders and teachers across Europe, the Middle East and Asia to better understand the ways in which digital technology might lead to more valid, flexible assessments for secondary quals in the future. And these focus groups were really insightful on a number of levels. Firstly, the appetite for on-screen assessment was huge, as we kind of expected through the survey. And secondly, we were really struck by the range of digital tools that are being used in the classroom across all subject areas. So from maths and science through to humanities and music, the role of technology is increasing in teaching, learning and formative assessment, but high stakes exams are not catching up. And why shouldn't they? Technology is not only an enabler of communication for young people, but it is central to it. And taking an assessment in an exam hall on pen and paper doesn't reflect the way that young people learn or the way that they'll be assessed in further study. And it certainly doesn't reflect the way they will work in the future if you think about the role of technology in work. So we think technology not only opens up opportunities in terms of flexibility of teaching, learning and assessment, but also the authenticity of the experience. So think about in the longer term, the possibilities for things like augmented and virtual realities to transport learners to a place, an environment that they could never dream of physically visiting. So in the context of geography, for example, or completing lab experiments for science taking place without the barriers of physical space. What if assessments could be taken on demand, taken when students are ready, taken remotely, with invigilation software that ensures the security of the exam when schools are closed? There are lots of possibilities for the future of on-screen assessment, and we think we're only at the beginning of the journey. So at this point, I'd just like to pause for a quick poll. So it'd be great in terms of a temperature check, if you could see on the screen, what is the most important thing that you would need to make the transition to on-screen assessment? So if you could take a moment just to reflect on the options there and to let us know your thoughts, that would be fantastic. So what we know as well is that some countries have already made the plunge, taken the plunge, I should say, and really made a transition to on-screen assessment in quite a transformational way. So 3 of those are Egypt, New Zealand and Finland, and each have started their journey at different points in time and different approaches and at different rates of speed and scale. But for each, they had one key driver in common, and that was to ensure that the assessment of skills and knowledge was better aligned to the use of digital technologies in teaching and learning, in learners' lives and the future of work. So Egypt is the first example that I'd like to take you through. So in Egypt, Pearson has played a pivotal role in the transition to on-screen assessment. In 2019, Pearson delivered a transformational project forming part of the educational reform program being introduced in Egypt's Ministry of Education with the financial support of the World Bank. And this is expected to deliver 125 million online assessments in a 4-year period, which is staggering if you think about that. The project's principal objective is to improve educational learning outcomes for Egyptian students and to improve student engagement. And it focuses on assessment in year groups 10, 11 and 12 and aims to improve assessment design and quality, as well as to modernise the delivery, marking and standard setting process. The project has delivered millions of assessments in its first year of operation and now in the second, and it's enabled the continuing function of Egypt's exam system during the COVID-19 pandemic, when many across the world were hugely disrupted, as we know. So to bring the experience of Egypt's transition to on-screen assessment to life, we're now going to share a short video with you. So I'm just going to come off screen share and present to you the video.
This project first started back in early 2018 when the Education Minister in Egypt, Dr. Tariq, approached us. What he basically wanted to do is to move away from pencil and paper exams and go totally online, which was a bold plan.
This initiative hasn't been done anywhere in the world. We're talking about 500,000 students every day accessing the exam at the same time. We had to deploy this platform within around 6 months, which hasn't been done before.
Dr. Tariq knew that he would need a company with the reputation of Pearson to be able to pull this off.
Looking back at the need to reform in Egypt, there was perception within the country that their assessment system and their education system was broken. There was a widespread emphasis on memorization and rote learning, and also there was a widespread perception that the system wasn't really fair.
It was a huge challenge. We faced cultural challenges like working to win over public perception, and technological challenges like setting up the infrastructure and data security for the first time.
Pearson had a great advantage because we have a really skilled team across the globe.
We were basically working 7 days a week, 16 hours a day to make this happen.
We conquered all of the setbacks and in one short year delivered very spectacularly on the overall programme.
The solution that we came up with was a totally electronic solution, from the writing of the exams all the way through to the delivery of the results. So far to date, we've delivered 10 million tests to over 1 million students across 23 different subjects in 6 different languages, and we've had about 30,000 teachers online marking those assessments in the first 12 months.
You can see more students are engaging and attending the assessments as well.
It's challenging the students, it's making them think about it, and it really is getting them back engaged with the learning process again.
Egypt has delivered a major benefit to all of its citizens. They've junked an out-of-date system and they've moved to one which is one of the most advanced in the world.
Given that I grew up in Egypt, it's really rewarding and it makes me really proud to see how the Egyptian educational system is transforming.
With this platform, we've now got the capability to take this, replicate it, make it even better anywhere else in the world. This is just the beginning of the journey.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour of what can really be achieved when there is a real desire to kind of take a transformational approach in terms of on-screen assessment. But there are 2 other countries that I'd just like to touch on in terms of a slightly different approach in terms of their transition. So the first is New Zealand. New Zealand's transition to on-screen assessment has been more of an iterative process than an overnight full-scale transition, as you've seen with Egypt. So there was interest in digitising assessments for secondary students around 8 years ago, and the first trials and pilots took place in 2016. But it's fair to say there was significant opposition at the beginning of the journey from teachers, from government, from wider society. Schools have had the opportunity to opt in to on-screen assessment as new subjects come online, with a transition first to literary-based subjects like English and history, and later they're looking at maths and sciences. So the point of curriculum reform in New Zealand is being seen as a real opportunity to design content that is digital first. So content designed to be assessed on screen rather than digitising content originally designed to be tested on paper. And key to the approach in New Zealand has been government provision of the technology, as we've seen in Egypt, and the infrastructure and connectivity that allows a level playing field across schools. So as I said, it's been iterative, trialling, piloting, building confidence and gaining momentum over time. And as outlined in the image, New Zealand very much see themselves as being on a journey towards a fully digital assessment system. And we think we have a lot to learn from their approach, and we're really looking forward to seeing the progress that they make in coming years. And the final country just to think about in an international context is Finland. So Finland is another country that's seen a huge shift to on-screen assessment in recent years. Their matriculation exam at the age of 18 has now been transitioned to online for every subject, with the first in 2016 and mathematics being the last to move on screen in spring 2019. So one of the key reasons for the shift to on-screen in the Finnish context has been the gap between low levels of digital literacy in the classroom and high levels of digital literacy in the workplace. So policy and decision makers in Finland saw there was a disconnect between the two, and there was an opportunity to close that gap by increasing use of digital technology in school education and assessment. So countries across the world are approaching the shift to on-screen assessment in different ways. And it would be great if you could take time to reflect on what might need to change in your own context to make digital assessment happen. And at the end of the presentation, it would be great to hear your views on that. So at Pearson, we have a wealth of experience in designing, developing and delivering on-screen assessments, and we're excited about the opportunities it might provide to create authentic learning and insights powered by technology in the coming years. So I'm now going to hand over to Mark, who's going to talk a little bit about our capability.
Super, thanks Meredith. Hi everyone. So yeah, sorry, I'm just running the slides and talking at the same time. Can never do two things at once. My machine's frozen as well. Okay, so our capabilities and experience in this space spans across a broad range of qualification types and assessments and delivery models. We've been delivering on-screen tests of functional skills, maths and English, and BTEC qualifications in both school and professional level for over 10 years. And our functional skills tests now offer a sort of limited amount of remote invigilation for candidates taking those assessments at home. This provides additional flexibility to test-taking conditions and still ensures the security of those exams. For PTE Academic, the first thing that I worked on when I joined 15 years ago, they've had a fully on-screen English language test delivered globally for 15 years. It's used by the UK, Australian and New Zealand governments for visa purposes. It's trusted by professional bodies and is used by over 3,000 universities around the world for entry criteria. It's now also available to be taken at home as well, with the same remote invigilation software as used by functional skills. And as we've just outlined, since 2019, we've partnered with the Egyptian Ministry of Education to design and deliver over 14 million high-stakes assessments to over 1.6 million senior secondary students in the country every year. In the context of general qualifications, we're also making really good progress towards our vision, with a number of exciting products and services already launched and more in pilot and development stages. We currently run on-screen GCSE and international GCSE mock exams for both English and maths. These were of particular interest to teachers during the school lockdowns, but the demands continued since schools have returned to classroom teaching. Our mock exams in English prepare learners either for the paper-based exams or for assessments that are going to be taken on screen, and they provide an efficient, seamless delivery with fully on-screen marked by our expert examiners. This summer, Pearson will continue to move forward with on-screen, and we're going to be the first to deliver on-screen GCSE computer science assessments, which will assess a candidate's coding skills under exam conditions. The coding is going to take place in a development environment familiar to each candidate, and that could be different in each school. It could also be different within the school for different learners within that class. And this is a really good example of how on-screen assessment can be used to tailor into personal solutions. So, on the international front, we're moving forward with our international GCSE English qualification, and we've been working with a small number of schools in the Middle East and Europe who will be completing their final assessments this May on screen rather than using a paper-based exam. Participating schools were onboarded in September, with learners and teachers having access to practice within our on-screen assessment platform to allow familiarisation and to build their confidence in using the tools. Students completed their first on-screen mocks in November, and most participating schools completed a second round of mocks in February. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. 78% of students expressed a preference for completing their assessments on screen rather than on paper. 97% of those students said they use digital technologies in their classes on a daily basis, and the same number said they completed and submitted homework using digital technologies every week too. For these students, the transition to on-screen assessment is a natural progression, but it's still a transition. The role of practice, of familiarisation, of building confidence in the technology and the layout of the assessment is so important. It's a journey, but it's a journey that they're all happy to be on with us. Now, myself, Meredith and Christina have done a lot of work with these schools over the past month in kind of being there when they've done the second round of mocks. And it's been really kind of enlightening to be there and see it happening. The experience was kind of overwhelming and really positive one for the schools. It's interesting to see it in action, and the kids really do take to it. And it's a really kind of, they're really keen to be involved in any future innovations and help shape this in the future. They want to be on the journey with us. Right. I'd like to provide a brief walkthrough on one of the international GCSE mock exams in our sandpit environment. So you'd like to be able to see it for yourself. So I'm going to switch over to a video and hopefully talk over the top. Okay, so logging into the assessment, we can see the exam cover is pretty much like the paper-based equivalent. The split screen formatting allows learners to see the stimulus on one side with scroll functionality, with the questions and the answer space on the other side of the screen. The learner is able to highlight text in a number of different colours, and they can also toggle between questions and stimulus material. Learners are able to choose the relevant questions where there is a choice available. They can also make use of the digital tools available, including this notepad function, which will remain on the screen for all questions and can be resized and moved around the screen. There's also a sticky note tool, which attaches to specific questions and allows notes to be made about that. Students can underline text in order to assist with their own planning and focus. There's also a number of accessibility tools, including the colour filters, which provide options for different colour combinations according to learners' needs, something that's particularly useful for dyslexic students. Students can also change the font size according to the preference and their need. And they can also flag questions to come back to. The platform will then provide them with an overview of those questions that are flagged, ones that they've attempted or not attempted at the end of the assessment before they actually finally submit. So that's the kind of student view and their experience of this. In addition to this, we also have an invigilator capability. And the invigilator has the ability to follow question by question every student's progress through the on-screen platform for the entire duration of the exam. Students are able to flag any concerns to an invigilator through the use of a single button. English language is a subject that translates well to on-screen, and hopefully this has provided you with a visual understanding of the process. I'll hand back to Meredith for the design.
Thanks very much indeed, Mark. Yeah, so just a note about our approach in terms of inclusive design, which to us is really important. one moment while I just bring it up. So in thinking about what we assess using on-screen technologies, inclusive design is a really important aspect. So almost 1/5 of the population of learners in England have some form of special educational need or disabilities or SEND, and or are on an educational healthcare plan to provide them with additional support in their education journey. So a proportion of learners are already using digital technology to complete their exams under access arrangements. So for example, in 2019 alone, around 10,000 exam scripts were completed using a word processor by SEND learners taking Pearson qualifications with access arrangements in place. So we need to continue to build our understanding of how our on-screen assessments can provide inclusive and fair access for all learners through, for example, embedding principles of universal design and inbuilt accessibility options within the platform. So Pearson has partnered with Assessment Microanalytics, or AMA, out of the University of East Anglia to understand the experiences of learners with SEND when interacting with our on-screen platform and assessment content. So we ran an initial small-scale study in 2021 with learners with a range of SEND characteristics from mainstream schools, and the report will be available on our website. So as you can see on the image, using eye tracking technology, the researchers were able to understand the cognitive process for learners participating in the study. So how they interacted with the assessment and how layout and presentation impacted on their test-taking experience. In terms of preference and enjoyment, there was overwhelming support from both teachers and students for digital exams. However, student preferences and enjoyment didn't always result in good accessibility, user experience and item performance. And this is something that needs careful consideration as we transition more towards digital forms of assessment. So to that end, we're also working with a small number of specialist providers to understand the experience of learners with more severe SEND characteristics. And we think that continuing to put these learners' voices at the centre of these studies will help us to shed light on what might make the experience of taking digital assessments more accessible and more inclusive in the future. So I'm now going to hand over to Christina to talk to us about the really exciting on-screen mock service that she is leading.
Thanks, Meredith. Hi, everybody. I'm here in a very sunny London, so we're taking advantage of a rare patch of sunlight that we're experiencing at the moment. And I have the pleasure of talking to you about our on-screen mock service. And we're really excited about this at the moment because it's an opportunity for you to get a real feel about what the future of on-screen assessments might look like right now. So the mock service, just to give you a bit of background, the mock service was created directly with teachers. And what I mean by that is we worked with a variety of centres to understand the biggest strain on workload at the moment. And as you'll know, and it won't be a surprise to anybody on this call, marking came up as one of the biggest pinch points. Now, within Edexcel, obviously, we have thousands of expert examiners. So we were really looking to create a service where we could tap into that level of expertise and turn it into a service that we can use to tangibly take away the burden of marking mock exams from our centres. Now, as we all know, mocks are essential for exam preparation, essential to helping students understand what to expect, and really crucially, essential to help support teachers identifying those really specific areas on where we need to focus revision, intervention in the lead up to the high stakes exams. So our on-screen mock service does a number of different things. It lightens the load on teachers. And because we're using that same examining team that marked the high stakes exams, we're able to provide consistency of marking across the full cohort. And we present that data back to you with using Results Plus, which I'll touch upon in a moment. But that gives you an incredibly detailed level of question, level analysis to help support that student progression and also teacher professional development. Now on your screen at the moment, you can see the subjects that we're currently offering for international qualifications. And we have IG Maths Spec A, IG English Language Spec A, and IG English Literature. But this is just the start. And we would really love to hear from you what we're missing and where we should be focusing our time and attention next. So please do feel free to add that into the chat. We would love to hear from you. So the next thing I just wanted to touch upon was the steps that you go through if you decide to join us on the mock service. So on your screen at the moment, you can see the mock service end to end, but essentially to keep it nice and simple, there are 2 steps to success. So we just need you to make sure that you've got the correct technical requirements, and that's hyperlinked into this slide deck, so you can access that afterwards. to deliver those on-screen assessments. We want to make sure that you're as successful as possible. So that's a really important step. And then the second step is just make the entries, and we will take care of everything else. Our examiners will mark the exams and will deliver the scripts back to you immediately. And you'll have your results back via Results Plus within 2 weeks of sending us of sitting the mocks. Now, just to give a little bit of context on what Results Plus is, because this is a question I've had quite often when schools ask me about the mock service and how your data will be presented back to you. Now, many of you may be familiar with the context of Results Plus in the sense of your May, June exams, but many customers are completely unaware of the benefits that you can get from Results Plus during your mock exams. So all of the lovely functionality that you're able to tap into post high stakes, so that detailed question level analysis of individual student performance, the identifying of topics and skills where students might need to develop further, each of the individual scores, everything you can see on your screen, we're able to work with you on for your mock exams as well. And the feedback that we've had from schools that we're working with at the moment is this enables you to just close that gap even quicker. So you've got complete clarity of those strengths, complete clarity on the areas that students might need to work on, and you're able to move really quickly and plug that gap. And then just on the next slide, I've got a quick visual of Results Plus, because one of my favorite things about Results Plus is how easy it is to see where those strengths are, how easy it is to see and pinpoint where you might want to be focused on and work on next. And if anybody is interested in any additional support on Results Plus, we do have a wealth of support materials on the Results Plus webpage for you to tap into. And then the next slide, I just wanted to touch upon really what is most important about this service and what's most important about Onscreen as a whole, as Mark and Meredith have both touched upon earlier. And that's really what our students and our teachers have to say about our service. The overwhelming sense has been very, very positive. And as Mark mentioned, we've been lucky enough to be in the room when some students have been sitting these mock exams on screen. And I was lucky enough to have a follow-up conversation with a group of students. And overwhelmingly, they're ready for this. They're ready for exams to be on screen. They're ready to sit their mock exams on screen. And what they were asking me for was how quickly can we move on everything else? So students are ready. We need to make sure we're supporting them in that space as well. Thanks, Mark. Just on to the next one. So apologies, that was a whistle-stop tour from a mocks perspective, but I wanted to make sure we had some time left to do a bit of Q&A with you at the end of this session. So now you've heard everything that we're currently working on, and hopefully you've had a chance to have a little think. Could you please add into the chat box how you're now feeling about Onscreen? We would love to hear your thoughts. Has it changed as we've progressed through the presentation? And just on your screen at the moment, you'll be able to see a couple of ways in which you can join us in shaping the future of Onscreen. So just a number of different ways you can be involved. So trying out the assessments for yourselves. So we have a sandbox environment, which is a nice safe space which you can use to trial on-screen assessments as many times as you want to. So we'll make sure you've got access to that link. You can join us through the mock service if you think that might be a service you're interested in getting involved with, or you can join us with some upcoming research and trials. We would love to work with you. I think that's everything from me, Susie. Back to you for question and answers, please.
Thank you very much, all three of you. That was indeed a whirlwind tour of online assessment, but I'm delighted to say there are lots of really interesting questions in the chat. So we've just got about 6 minutes. So I'm going to start from the top. If we do not get to your question, we will take it offline and answer it offline. So thank you to everybody who has submitted them so far. So the first question is from Rebecca, who is at Crimson Global Academy. And she's referring back to what you were talking about initially, Meredith, and saying, are you suggesting that IG and international A-level public examinations would be available on a rolling basis across the whole year at some point in the future? And Rebecca's saying that she would support that, as at her school, they have multiple intakes at multiple times of the year.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks very much for the great question. So what I would say is we're certainly not suggesting that that's going to happen for IG and IAL qualifications in the immediate future. But what I guess is interesting about on-screen assessment and the way that you author question papers in a different way for on-screen assessment is that it does allow to think about different opportunities and more flexible kind of modes of delivery and models for delivery. So I would say never say never. And I would say that, yeah, the opportunity is there to think differently about what we're doing at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. Simon is in Sri Lanka and he's asking, are there any charities or organisations that could help a bold school take this leap of faith and provide his pupils with the kit needed to access it? In the Egyptian video, the children looked like they were using iPads. Do we know of any support available in different locations?
It's a really good question. I don't know, I genuinely don't know the answer to that in terms of your location, Simon, but I think it's certainly something that we are thinking about in terms of equity of access, because we absolutely understand that this is going to be something that schools kind of adopt over time, but there are lots of bigger questions about equity of access. So I would say that any support that we can provide in terms of locating support services, we'd be really happy to do so. So please do connect with us in the kind of follow-ups. But yeah, it's certainly a wider question that we know needs to be addressed.
Lovely, thank
we
you.
know that the technology companies are really keen to be involved in this as well, so they might be an area that we could approach. Those, if Egypt, they used Samsung tablets, but they were supplied by the Ministry of Education for Egypt. They did a deal with Samsung for that.
Great, thanks, Mark. Rebecca has also asked, how do you see the marking changing in the future with the change in methods of assessment that on-screen examinations present? Are we researching AI in marking written responses?
I can answer that. Yes, we are. Primarily around the kind of really low stakes formative assessment, so marking classwork, marking homework. We'll test out how well that works and how effective it is before we can then roll on to kind of high stakes assessment. Some of those things that we get now could be marked without using AI just automatically once we've moved on screen. So we are heading in that direction, but again, that is going to be some time away. Okay.
And Simon has asked, presumably no spell check with the online examination option.
Yeah, that's right. So the spell check is turned off where spelling, punctuation and grammar are part of the marking criteria. So obviously that in terms of this, what we turn on and off will differ by subject and by the kind of the needs of the kind of marking criteria.
Got you.
Yeah, and that's not only in the answer space, but in the notepads and in the sticky notes as well.
Brilliant. Okay. Another question from Simon. He's very engaged. It's lovely to have your question, Simon. Have students done better grades-wise with online assessments than with paper-based assessments? So does it provide them with better opportunities to score better?
Great question. One of the things that we're really keen to highlight is the fact that our approach to standard setting and making sure that no learner is unduly advantaged or disadvantaged by taking their assessment on screen. So what we need to remember, obviously, is we are running at the moment for International GCSE English a paper-based assessment and an on-screen assessment that is for the same qualification. So it's really important that we are looking at the data really carefully in the process that we go through called awarding, which is where we set the grade boundaries for the assessments and the qualification in each sitting. So that data is really carefully analysed. Interestingly, talking to our colleagues in New Zealand who've gone through this journey recently, their kind of findings are that there isn't really a great deal of modal effect. So that means the impact of the assessment in terms of making it harder or easier. But what we will be doing is absolutely going through the process of doing the analysis to understand exactly what effect, if any, that has, and considering that in our awarding process. But what we do find is in terms of accessibility, in terms of learner engagement, they're certainly finding that they're able to communicate their ideas more easily in terms of our qualitative feedback from our mock service so far.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, we have 1 minute left and I've got a couple of questions remaining that I think we can answer. So first question here, is the platform an existing tool or is it brand new?
So it's an existing tool and it was built just before the Egypt Con in 2019 and so it's been in use ever since then.
Okay, lovely. And Peter's asking, are these assessments something you anticipate being done on campus or remotely?
Another great question. Oh, shall I talk about where we are now, Mark? And possibly...
Go for it, Meredith.
Yeah, so at the moment, at the schools who've been involved in mocks and in the pilot are taking their assessments in school, and they have the option either to use the computer-based, the school-owned devices, or candidates in some circumstances are using their own devices as well, with obviously minimum specs. We're absolutely looking at remote invigilation in the future, and we'd be really keen to hear from you what your views are about whether that's something that would be desirable for in your context. Obviously, there are challenges around that, but as Mark touched on, both our PT academic and our functional skills qualifications in the UK offer remote invigilation. So really interested to hear from you about what your thoughts are.
Great.
And sorry, Mark, do you wanted to add?
No, the technology exists to deliver this stuff. That's not the problem. I think what we've got to get ideas about is how you can turn the home environment into a secure assessment centre. And so people are a lot more relaxed at home, and you don't necessarily bring that assessment, high stakes exam mindset to the room.
Great. Rebecca's saying, would it be possible to gain more information on the low stakes assessment for learning that you're trialling with AI marking? Rebecca's referring to the AI marking that you were talking about, Mark. She said she'd be very interested in getting involved in any research with that. So I'm assuming it would be fine for Rebecca to contact you, Mark. Well, do you want to just pop your...
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah, okay.
I'll put my details out there.
Lovely, thank you very much. And then the final question, I'm aware we've just gone 1 minute over time. I would like to know if there are any mock service for Pearson primary achievement tests.
Shall I take that one?
Thank you.
We don't have any mock service for primary at the moment, but again, we're really keen to hear from you. So if we would love to hear sort of the reasoning behind it and where you think the gap is. So actually, Susie, if we can get my details over to this question, that would be great to reach out and get in contact.
Wonderful. Yes, Christina, just pop your details in the chat box, and then they can pick them up from there. That would be brilliant. Right. Thank you for staying with us. I'm aware that we've gone just slightly beyond our time. And thank you to Meredith, Mark and Christina, and to all of you who've joined us here today. We will share certificates of attendance, a link to the recording of this webinar, and a form for you to find out more about on-screen assessment at Pearson. We'll send that by email to you tomorrow. And I will just give a very quick plug for the next big think in our series, which will take place at the end of April, where we'll be discussing the evolving role of online schooling as a way to add breadth and depth to your curriculum. And we're hoping to have some international school leaders who are making some really brave and innovative strides in that space. So do look out for launch comms about that one soon. I do hope you can join us for that. And thank you again for joining us. Thanks to our presenters, and have a great rest of the week, everybody.